This video is brought to you by Mubi, a curated streaming service dedicated to elevating great cinema from all around the globe. Get a whole month free at mubi.com/yarazaid. Every once in a while, a great movie comes out. You watch it and you think, wow, this really is something. The story grabs you, the characters stay with you, the score becomes an earworm, and you find yourself thinking about it at random intervals. Each time it comes to mind, you utter a quiet and impressed, damn. And sometimes those movies are so good that as soon as the credits finish rolling, you exhale a heavy, beleaguered sigh and think, this is about to have a whole lot of suns. Jordan Peele's Get Out was a refreshing, exciting, and terrifying take on a classic. A Meet the Parents story made frightening by not only placing it in the horror genre, but imbuing it with themes of racism and social disparity. Get Out doubled as a terrifying, you're surrounded horror movie and a deconstruction of racism, all the while managing to avoid becoming an overly preachy expository info dump. The dialogue never felt heavy-handed, and more importantly, it was made by a person who knows and respects horror. Even without knowing much about Peele as a director, without watching interviews or hearing his commentary, it's very obvious from his work how much he admires horror. Get Out has elements from The Stepford Wives and Rosemary's Baby, and Peele has cited John Carpenter and Alfred Hitchcock as inspirations, and he uses those influences to create horror where the story comes first. I will tell you what I mean by that in a moment. Get Out was widely acclaimed and was nominated for 4 Academy Awards, including Best Picture and Best Original Screenplay, which Peele won. The success of Get Out led to an increased attention on this subgenre of horror films that focused on the Black experience and gave younger viewers a new perspective on films once considered throwaway slashers like Candyman and Tales from the Hood. For decades, American horror films rarely focused on Black characters, or any characters of color for that matter. The biggest shift would happen in 1968 when viewers met the one and only Ben. Ben was a character played by Dwayne Jones in George A. Romero's groundbreaking Night of the Living Dead. The content of Ben's character has been a topic for decades, as he was not just a Black character in a horror film, but he was really the main character, and he was a sensible person, not a caricature, not a joke, a fully fleshed out character whose survival instincts got him through a zombie apocalypse, only to be killed by a cop after the fact. People don't talk about it enough, but Dwayne Jones was a full-on scream king. He didn't have a whole lot of movies in his filmography. He'd only been in like 6 films, but 5 of those were horror films, so put some respect on Mr. Jones's name. Seriously though, check out Ganja and Hess. It's one of my favorite vampire films, and he's absolutely legendary in it. The 1970s, characterized by cheaply made blaxploitation movies, had the occasional horror story thrown in, like Abby, Sugar Hill, and Black Frankenstein, or Blackenstein. Which one is it called? I don't know. The 80s saw a big dip in Black leading characters in the horror genre, but I'll give an honorary mention to Vamp because Grace Jones plays the villain and she's absolutely tantalizing. I would let her drink my blood. In the 90s, there was a slight resurgence with films like Demon Knight, one of the first films to have a Black final girl, and The People Under the Stairs, which is my favorite Wes Craven film. People are always surprised to hear that this one is my favorite from Wes Craven, because I have this condition where I can't shut the fuck up about Scream. But it's true, Fool has my heart. Despite the great strides made in telling Black stories within horror, there were always ups and downs entirely at the whim of what studios deemed to be worth investing in. There was a surge in the 70s because of the aftermath of Night of the Living Dead and the popularity of blaxploitation. There was a dip in the 80s because blaxploitation was out. Just saying that blaxploitation is out calls to mind how like Blackness is seen as a trend, because like in the 70s it was really popular for people to get afros, you know, and then once that stopped being a fad, then like, I don't know what I'm trying to say. I just think that's another topic, whatever. There was a slight surge in the 90s thanks to the release of Candyman and People Under the Stairs, plus the rising popularity of Black celebrities in the golden age of the Black sitcom. There was another dip in the aughts where the biggest releases were the Blade sequels and Bones, that movie starring Snoop Dogg that's like really bad but also amazing. The 2010s were pretty scant as well, but by the end of the 2010s, a shift was bound to happen because in 2017, Get Out changed the game. People saw the success of Get Out and many clamored to get some of that limelight. Studios were greenlighting more horror films led by Black characters, and creatives were telling more stories with Black leads. But it wasn't just about having more Black leads. What was being pitched and greenlit weren't just horror stories with Black leads, but specifically movies about the horror of existing while Black. The slightest distinction that has become an unsightly flaw on the face of Black horror. Whenever a movie sees widespread success, there are guaranteed to be two results: copycats and misinterpretations. The Blair Witch Project kickstarted the surge of found footage horror films. The popularity of Barbie will undoubtedly see an increase in movies based on children's toys. Some might be good, most will very likely be shit. The misinterpretation with Get Out was the idea that it was successful as a story about racism first and a horror movie second, meaning a lot of the copycats weren't so concerned with writing an engaging horror narrative, but more concerned with laying heavy-handed themes on top of a banal template. Okay, so not every movie deemed to be a Get Out copycat actually is a Get Out copycat. The epidemic of copycats is parallel only to the epidemic of people ready to call any horror movie with a black lead a Get Out knockoff. I selected these films to highlight in this video because these movies were either pitched or marketed as Get Out type stories. The Inner Jacket of One of Our Kind, for example, calls it a Get Out meets Stepford Wives type of story. Obviously, there is nothing wrong with using Get Out or any other movie as a comp, and I think it's more than possible to tell horror stories about racism, but you can always tell what was made with sincerity and what wasn't, what was made as a genuine creative endeavor and what was made with the intent to capitalize off of the success of something else. One of the biggest differences between Get Out and other horror stories that were made with its success in mind is the thin line between a black trauma movie and a movie about black trauma. Princess Weeks has an amazing video on this topic where she skillfully outlines what makes a black trauma film. Black trauma versus black horror. It's a great video and I recommend watching it because I'm not going to get into the difference in this video here at all. I kind of just want to talk about a few movies that were made with Get Out in mind and dig into why they don't really work. So I highly recommend watching Princess's video, and I'm not just saying that because it's dedicated to me. It is, but it's also really good, and that's that. I'll be looking at projects like Karen and Antebellum. I was going to include the 2024 novel One of Our Kind, but I figured the runtime was long enough, and by long enough, I mean long enough for me. I'm the one who has to edit this shit, and I'm so lazy. If you're interested in a full review of the novel though, I did include it as an audio-only episode on Patreon. I was also going to watch them for this, but then I remembered, I love myself. I know it's low-hanging fruit, but let's just ease into this. Karen is a BET original about, of course, a woman named Karen who is a Karen that continually harasses her new black neighbors. Basically a Lakeview Terrace type of story with a slight inversion. From the outset, Karen does not feel like a story about people as much as it is a story about ideas and caricatures. I know, I shouldn't expect a movie named after a caricature to not be a non-stop barrage of caricatures. That's on me. The creators of this movie were so giddy about the concept that they couldn't resist the urge to put in not one, not two, but 3 lines referring to how funny it is that their Karen is named Karen.
Wait a minute, we have a white entitled neighbor named Karen?
So Karen is a Karen. Bro, she's a Karen named Karen.
If you were expecting any subtlety here, think again because this is the opening shot. Like most of the movies I'll be talking about, the concept is fine enough. White flight is a very real thing, housing discrimination is a very real thing, so a horror story about a black family moving into a mostly white suburb could be executed well in an alternate universe. But Karen is one of those stories that never went beyond an initial light bulb moment. It's rushed and so much of it seems to have been improvised on the spot. Ideas are brought up only to never be seen again. Characters accuse other characters of doing things they didn't do, and not in a way where it's like a misunderstanding, but in a way where character A did not do the thing, but for some reason when character B accuses them of doing the thing, character A is like, yeah, I did that thing, and so what? People forget their own standards, like this woman here who has this exchange with Karen when the couple first moves in.
It's like that, new neighbors, huh? And they're black.
And then at the HOA meeting says this.
I think we all know that I got some new neighbors on my block.
Yes, the black couple.
Yes.
It's African American. Oh. Right.
It's a mess, but it's not just the title character. The couple we focus on, Imani and Malik, aren't fully realized people. They're moving into their new house, happy to be married, first-time homeowners, and on their way to starting a family. They immediately meet Karen, their neighbor, who manages to get their attention without even doing anything.
Hi.
Moments like these pop up a lot in this movie, people reacting to things before anything happens. Either the actors were a little too eager or the sound editor just didn't give a fuck. The subdivision they decide to move into is not only named after a Confederate soldier, but also has plantation in the name.
It's a new day and age. We should be able to live wherever we want.
And why is our subdivision named Harvey Hill Plantation? You know that's a Confederate soldier, right?
Now, I'm not saying no black couple would ever move here. I just doubt the kind of black couple who would buy a house in a place under that name would also be the kind of black couple that says black excellence and expresses their love to one another by reminding each other that they are both, in fact, strong black people.
You are a strong, beautiful, intelligent, and woke black man.
And my wife's a shit. She's a strong black woman. College educated, socially aware. And on top of that, a strong, beautiful black woman.
The biggest difference between projects like these and Get Out is how these stories treat their characters, from side characters to the main snack. Chris is a black man, but he's not written as if that's the most important thing about him as a person. He has a passion for photography, a nicotine addiction that he's trying to kick, an unresolved trauma from the death of his mother, and the guilt he feels for not doing more, thinking that if he had done more, if he had called someone, she would have lived. Character-wise, Chris is perceptive, intelligent, and generally low-key. He's not someone who's particularly bombastic with his emotions. He keeps things close to the vest. This could be a result of existing in a world that punishes hyper-emotionality of men, and this could also just be who he is. The point is, we know a lot about Chris as a person, not just as a character experiencing the horrors of existing while black. He's more than just a springboard for brutalization and starting a discussion, whereas the stories here can't seem to write black characters without writing their blackness to be their strongest characteristic, or their trauma to be their strongest characteristic. There's a scene where Imani and Malik host a housewarming party, and it's the first time we see a full group of black people. The topic of discussion at this house party is police brutality and protest. Now, I'm not going to sit here and pretend that these topics don't come up among black people. That couldn't be farther from the truth. I don't think it's unrealistic for this topic to be the main conversation happening at a house party, but I do find it discouraging that it's the only topic we see this group discussing. It'd be one thing if the conversation started one way and slowly escalated to darker topics, the tension building and the discomfort growing, but to have this be the only conversation they have says a lot about how this movie views and values its black characters. And this is a BET original. This movie begs the improbable question, what if Octavia Butler's magnum opus Kindred was bad? It feels unfair to compare this to Kindred, unfair both to the co-directors of Antebellum, Gerard Bush and Christopher Renz, and unfair to Octavia Butler. Still, the comparisons to Kindred are to be expected. Both stories are set initially in the modern day. Both follow writers who are forced into 19th century plantations. One of these stories weaves a rich and devastating portrayal of the bonds that break us and make us. One of these stories is Antebellum. The movie follows Veronica, a successful sociologist, activist, and author, according to the screen behind her, whose life is upended when she's kidnapped and finds herself waking up on a plantation in the Antebellum South. At least, that's what the story should have been. For some inconceivable reason, the film begins with Veronica already on the plantation, being beaten and branded and renamed Eden. We know nothing about her when this story starts. I think there's something to be said about the fact that our first introduction to this character is a 5-minute scene of her being tortured. For these 5 minutes, she is nameless. For the creators of this film, the most important thing about her is what she's going to experience on this plantation. I think that already tells you a lot about what to expect. This is a film impressed with the frequency of its own violence, as if it's capable of getting across the complexities of blackness in America solely through the extent of the cruelty it's willing to depict. One need look no further than the opening sequence to understand what I mean by that. In Angelica Jade Bastien's review for the film, titled "I Am Tired of Films Like Antebellum," she writes, "It implicitly argues that depictions of suffering are the best means of understanding what it means to be black in America." The opening sequence, as well shot as it is, prioritizes location and concept before its characters. I understand introducing us to the world, especially in a horror movie, we as the audience have to know what we're up against. If the introduction to the world isn't going to come with the introduction to the main character, then at the very least it should come soon after. By soon, preferably say 5 minutes. Maybe not 40. It's 40 minutes into the film when we learn the character we've known as Eden, a name forced upon her, is actually called Veronica. It's 40 minutes into the film where that information I gave you about the story at the beginning of this section is information we get. I don't think you need to be a movie expert to know that that is way too much time. And when we do go back to Veronica's real life pre-kidnapping, we still come away with little knowledge about who she is as a person. I know who she is in her career and how she's important in certain circles, but I don't know enough about her as a person outside of who she is to other people. Even without considering the effect it has on us getting to know this character, from an editing standpoint alone, the story makes no sense in this order. What makes more sense for us is ordinary world, i.e. Veronica being a best-selling author and going on a book tour. Then we get strange, unsettling things happening, like remnants of the past showing up in the present. Then the plantation. With that in mind, we would have a better idea of exactly what kind of world this is. It would be one thing if this was set during the Antebellum South, but for us to have already known that it takes place during the modern day, we'd have a better idea of what we were up against. We would know what the characters know, and we would be engaged. By introducing the story as plantation first and ordinary world second, we're left both befuddled by the sudden shift and in the dark about the story's circumstances, not fully understanding the depravity we're about to witness. Simply put, it's hard to maintain any intrigue with this story structure, and I cannot for the life of me begin to understand why they did it like this. The only thing I can come up with is that they wanted some sort of twist, but how much of a twist is it when all the promotional material, including the trailer, already told you that there was a modern day aspect to this? It's very clear watching the movie that there were plot lines intended that were either cut, never written, or written but never fully thought out. For example, the story constantly alludes to there being some sort of connection between what's happened on the plantation, which we are initially meant to understand is the past, and what is happening in modern day, calling to mind a sort of unexplainable supernatural connection that transcends time, like what we see in Kindred. Veronica has a line about her ancestors that aids to this, and the movie opens with a quote from William Faulkner. Things are set up in such a way to give you the impression that the past is bleeding into the present. There's a scene where Veronica returns to her hotel room and during the elevator ride meets a little white girl who is supposed to be ghostly, dressed in old-fashioned clothes, playing with a doll that has racist origins. In a story where the past is bleeding into the present, or in a story that was promoted that way, this could be haunting. A little ghost girl who's long dead appearing in the present, or a little girl from a different time somehow finding her way to the now. Either way, it presents a breadcrumb to some sort of mysticism at play. But seeing as the actual story is about modern day white supremacists kidnapping black people and forcing them to work on recreated plantation, this scene is out of place and frankly stupid, as are the lines alluding to an unexplainable connection between the past and the present. But it's unfair to call out this scene as being out of place when there are so many scenes that simply don't belong here. Most of the scenes feel random and completely inconsequential. There's a scene where Elizabeth, played icily by Jenna Malone, goes into Veronica's hotel room and just starts messing shit up. She knocks down papers, she uses the bathroom and doesn't flush, she takes Veronica's lipstick. The scene is probably meant to show us just how close Elizabeth is to Veronica and how she can get her at any moment. When I first watched, I thought this was going to set up Veronica's kidnapping, that when she returned to her room, everything would go down. But nothing happens to her when she goes back to her room, and we don't even get a scene of Veronica reacting to the mess. We don't even know if she knows that she's being fucked with. It's a completely pointless scene. Antebellum was pushed by the studio as being from the producer of Get Out and Us, aiming to get the Jordan Peele crowd and use his name without directly using his name to say that this movie would be cut from the same cloth. It's even heavily promoted on the film posters. Karen is more of a reaction to the culture and an extension of what Get Out started, but I don't think it was ever trying to be the next Get Out. Master, upon release, was reviewed by critics who couldn't stop comparing it to Get Out, but Mariama Diallo did not write the movie to be that. She wrote it to mirror her own experiences as a black woman in academia, and I would say anyone pushing it as the next Get Out were people who tend to flatten any and all horror stories aiming to reflect the black experience as being the next Get Out, even when they aren't. But Antebellum here, I think Antebellum wanted to be the next Get Out. I want to clear this up. There will never be another Get Out. Sure, there will be. Shit, there are plenty of movies influenced by Get Out. either by the movie itself or by what it came to represent. There's no arguing about that. But there will never be another Get Out, just like there will never be another Scream. Scream has continued with a persevering franchise, but the original, that moment, what it meant, what it captured, can never be recreated. Studios will claim the opposite, that there can be and that there are plenty of new Get Outs. Part of it is just simple marketing, no harm, no foul, but the other part of it is more sinister. The part that sees any horror film with a black lead and goes, it's just like that other popular horror film with a black lead, even if they have nothing in common. Not every black story is the same, not every black horror story is the same. Both Tales from the Hood and Get Out are horror stories that cover black experiences, some with supernatural elements, some without, but I don't think anyone would say Tales from the Hood is similar to Get Out. They couldn't be more different in their styles, in their themes, in their tone, etc. And I would argue that it's dismissive of the art itself to compare every black horror film to Get Out, whether that comparison starts in the pitch room or in the reviews for the film after the fact. To quote Odie Henderson in their review for Master, "I'll tell you what it's not. It's not another Get Out, as many reviews coming out of this year's Sundance proclaimed. Black movies always get compared with other well-known black movies, whether they're similar or not. Now that's a microaggression that should be murdered by a witch." Mubi is a curated streaming service dedicated to elevating great cinema from all around the globe. From iconic directors to emerging auteurs, there is always something new to discover. With Mubi, each and every film is hand-selected by its team of curators. Discover the best of cinema at your fingertips, streaming anytime, anywhere. I've been paying a lot more attention to shorts as of late, not sure why. I think I'm just appreciating brevity more than anything else at the moment. It's amazing how some films can get across so much with so little, how they can absolutely devastate or inspire you in a matter of minutes, seconds. One I want to highlight is Aribada, a transcendent invitation into this world of magical realism. You can find it on Mubi in the United States, where it's included in a collection called Brief Encounters. This collection is full of beautiful short films from innovative directors, and keep an eye on this section because new short films are added every so often, and I personally can't get enough of them. You can try Mubi for 30 days at mubi.com/Yarazade. That is mubi.com/Yarazade for a whole month of great cinema for free.